Hello, check two. 1 2 1 2. Ezra, come. Hello, check mic 2. 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2. It's not coming at all. It's not even coming at all. Hello, check 2. You think you had this challenge? No, no. There is a challenge already.
2 and 2. Hello, 1 2
1 2 1 2 1
2
2 1
2.
2 1 2. This one is Agrico clapping. 1 2. Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Check 2. Can you increase the volume? Hello? I can hear you. Mornings. Bonjour. Can you hear me? Okay. Merci. Eh? My and sorry.
Okay, we are set. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Adam Al-Hareka. My name is Adam Al-Hareka. I'm Director of Macroeconomic Policy Division of United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. And it is my pleasure to moderate this session on fostering agro-allied industrialization through regional value chain. We heard a lot about value chains as one of the instruments for promoting agricultural transformation in Africa. Of course, value chains normally start with national value chains. But in the context of Africa, regional value chains are equally or probably more important than national value chains. We have a panel of distinguished experts in the area, and we will start with a presentation, a keynote presentation by Dr. Osmani Badian. While we are setting the presentation, let me briefly introduce Dr. Osmani Badian. Is the Africa Director for the International Food Policy Research Institute. He coordinates IFBRI's work program in the areas of food policy research, capacity strengthening, and policy communications in Africa. Dr. Badian was instrumental in developing and guiding the implementation of the comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program. We heard a lot about CADIP and why we have not been able to fully implement CADIP in Africa, and I think we'll hear more about it today. Before his current tenure at IFBRI, Dr. Badian, a national of Senegal, was lead specialist for food and agricultural policy for the Africa region at the World Bank and adjunct professor at Johns Hopkins University's School of Advanced International Studies. He received a PhD in agricultural economics from the University of Kiel in Germany. His awards include a doctoral degree, honorary degree from the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, and an induction as Distinguished Fellow of the African Association of Agricultural Economists. Dr. Badian is a 2015 laureate of the African Food Prize. So we have very distinguished speakers this morning, and let us give him a round of applause. Dr. Badian, you will have 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. I think, let me be generous for the presentation. It's yours.
Good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here to attend the conference. And I think everybody at AFDB, of course, starting from the top leadership, but particularly I thank my friend Celestin for extending this invitation. I've been asked to talk about agro-allied industrialization and regional value chain. Let me see. Okay, well, it works. So you'll bear with me. This is very tricky. There's a wheel that I have to scroll here to move through the slides. Okay. So, but when we talk about agro-allied industrialization, we have to think from the market first. Where is the market for that? Because you develop those goods and you process them for the market. And what I would like you to do looking at this, which is in a book we published a couple of years ago, and I have a couple of issues here which I can share. By 2030, most African countries will be middle income. And by 2050, all of them will be middle income countries. And this is the dynamic level of threshold of middle income. It's not the one from this year. And there's going to be a lot of income in a lot of pockets of hundreds of millions of people asking for food. And that's where agro-allied industrialization has an potential and opportunities. Trade as well, across all major regions, is going to go up quite rapidly. You just look at the curves and look at what's happening. We can talk about what happened in COMESA, which is a structural shift. Traditional exporters were fading out the market and the new exporters were coming. So during the time when they overlap, so that's explained this U curve. But again, there you see by 2025, exporters are going to go up very, very rapidly. And this is only staple in local foods that we're talking about. The cassavas, the millets, the cowpeas, and what have you. And they're not all going to be consumed raw. They're going to be processed. This is work that was done when I was at the NEPA Secretariat back in 2005. And we're looking at what were the dynamics of demands in African urban markets by 2030. You look at the dark blue color, which says that urban food demand is going to go from 50 billion, to 150 billion between 2000 and 2030. You look at traditional exports that we have, they're going to go by, if you take them together, maybe 10 billion. So 10 times bigger than what we're realizing exporting the cocoas and the coffees and the tea. So obviously, the local demand is a much bigger market, and tapping into that through agro-allied industrialization, not just for exports. Of course, we have to do that, but the local domestic market is huge. And if we were to capture that in a way that brings smallholders into it, which is a big challenge I'm not going to go into today, but I know that this country has tried quite a lot to bring them into the new modern value chains. But if we succeed in tapping into the demand and bringing the smallholder farmers to be part of those modern value chains, they stand to make $30 billion. And there are very few African economies who have a GDP of $30 billion today. So that tells you how much money it is that they could make. And why that demand is important. Here is the projections by my friend Dave Shirley at Michigan State University. Look at the last two columns. Most of the growth in demand for food will be concentrated between high value added processed food and low value added processed food. They'll be growing between 5 and 7 times faster. They'll be multiplied by 7, I'm sorry. And in the non-perishable sector, and you look at the perishable sector by 8 and 10. So they'll be growing so fast over the next 30 years. So that by 2040, you will have about 40% of all food demand in the non-perishables consisting of processed, low value added and high value added. And you're going to have a third in the perishable sector, because the perishables, a lot of it doesn't need to be processed, it's eaten fresh, right? But still there, a third will be processed. So that is what's behind those income dynamics that you have seen. Now let me take a very good example of a traditional value chain, go through how it is changing, and then we discuss what that means for industrialization and what that means for enterprise creation and job. This is the traditional millet value chain in Senegal, and will look like that in Mali, will look like that in Burkina Faso. So you go to the farm, you harvest the millet, you go to a mill around the corner, you mill it, and you get the different meals and product that you will do out of it. And all this takes place in the house, not outside of the house. And if you happen to live in a house where there's nobody who could do it, you wouldn't eat it. But once you're done, then you could cook these meals. That's what people make out of millet-based. But from the farm to the table, that's the process it used to go. Everything in situ in the house. Now today, you have all those ready-to-eat meal, what you see in those containers, off the shelf, ready to buy. So you don't have to go to the farm, you don't have to go to a mill, you don't have to have somebody in the house to do it. You go and you buy the Coke meals, which are ready and branded, and there are dozens of brands in the market right now. You can cook the same meals, but if you're lazy like me, you just go and you buy the same meals ready off the shelf. Okay? So this is what agro-allied industrializations mean, actually. Yes, we may think about those bigger sectors, right? But that's where the money is. And this has transformed eating habits in Senegal now. It's a habit in the weekend to eat millet-based meals. And in the 70s, when you went to Dakar, you wouldn't eat millet-based meal because there's nobody in the house who could do those kind of things. And this has created jobs and enterprises very important for women and youth. We don't actually know that sector. We're just now with Michigan State University doing a research on that. What's important about this, if you see it, you want to know how are the enterprises being created? How do they acquire technology? How do they upgrade their skills? How are they being funded? What are the distribution networks? What does it do for millet growing areas? What does it do for dietary quality and things like that? So those are important questions that we haven't looked at yet. Oh, sorry, see, I told you this is going too quick. Now, the difficulty we have in this sector, as you would have probably in cassava here in the garlic sector and somewhere else, is that once you have these kind of technologies, a lot of people rush into it. And they're imitating the same thing in copying. You have the number of firms just goes skyrocket. We cannot count the numbers of enterprises that are in the millet production, millet processing, and packaging industry. You will have the same thing here as well. But what this does, when you have a very rapid increase and continuous increase of this, you tend to have a drop in profitability. And that's why you don't get beyond that. So what we really have to find is how can we make sure that we continue to have enterprise creation and growth without profits falling? If you don't solve that, then you're not going to have industrialization, because this means that profit increase, people invest more, they consolidate, they specialize, and they have bigger entities. Okay, and that is the big question we have. So this is what you would like to do. You would like the profit curve, which is the green one, instead of continuing to slide, to go up. But for that to happen, you have to get the number of firms to go down because they're going to be bigger. They will consolidate, they specialize. You still have smaller ones among themselves, but some will just maturate. Right? So that is the process of industrialization. How do you get small, beginning enterprises that are created to have access to technology, access to know-how, access to capital, access to markets, access to distribution networks so that they can expand? Okay. And I'll go and discuss each one of those priority areas that one have to focus on for policy and investment, and I hope that my panel members will expand on that. First, process and product innovation. If you don't master that, you're not going to industrialize. What it requires is good system for technology acquisitions. Could be homegrown technology, but also could be imported technology. But the people who are today processing millet have to access technologies. The people who are processing gari, the people who want to process cowpea tomorrow, or who want to process whatever you produce, they cannot invent it themselves. Somebody has to have a system where that technology is created locally or imported and adapted domestically. Then they have to be trained on those new technologies. And you look across Africa and you try to count where do we have vocational and professional training systems. I'm not just talking about schools, but systems in general that allows for skills upgrading, that allows for skills development. Where do we have it? Then how can you win the battle for industrialization if you don't have it? So it's extremely important. And I do hope that really countries will pay attention to that. You go to, wonder industrialized countries like Germany, the system of apprenticeship and the system of vocational training is extremely developed there, even for farming. I'm just not talking about industry alone. So let me then take this one by one. For process and product innovation, here are examples. And I just started commenting on that. If you don't have good vocational and professional training systems, you don't have opportunities that will allow people to upgrade their skills, even in the farming sector, because they have to produce better. Once you go into industrialization, then you have standardization. It has to be a specific quality. It has to be maybe a specific level of humidity, maybe a specific shape, maybe regularity in crops. So you have to do something by the farming as well. Then you have to develop the new skills in the transforming sectors. machine operations and maintenance needs to be learned. You just don't walk into a factory and know how to do that. Processing technology and skills. It's taking place today, but it's so haphazard, it's so ad hoc, a project here, an NGO there, a little tiny thing here. How do we get to a system approach to doing that? Management and sales. The biggest difficulty for many of those micro enterprises being created is how you manage, how you generate sales, and how you be able to grow, because you haven't learned it and nobody's teaching you how to do that. And of course, you get into the packaging and distribution, food quality and safety. All those are equally important. So these have to be addressed in a coherent, consistent, and systemic way. And winning the battle for agro-industrialization will mean having the systems that allow us to do that. To the second point, so now technology is playing. Can you help? I want to go to the next slide. Oh, that's what it happened. Okay, very good. Now to the second point, market access, which means you have to be competitive, you have to have trade. And here what I would like to do is to go back and look at what options you have to improve competitiveness and expand the regional markets, which create the environment for agro-allied industrialization if you don't have it. And here it's work we did 2 years ago. We just looked at very 3 simple measures that every country would know how to do. It's not complicated. You could reduce trading costs in general, and every country would know what it means. They will look at, it's an empirical issue, what is determining and driving trading cost. You can remove all the cross-border trade barriers we know about between between Togo and Benin and Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire and Senegal and Mali and what have you. Or you can, actually you can do all 3 of them together, invest in raising yields and productivity. I don't want to go into individual bars, but the red dotted line is the 20% increase line. If you did 10% positive change in each one of those 3 areas, the different bars tells you for different crops in different parts of Africa how much change you can get by doing that. Okay? And this demand is going to be stimulating the agro-allied industrialization that we just talked about, because most of these products will be demanded but processed, not unprocessed. The third one, the cost of services and infrastructure access, which is extremely important. Power, telecom, and transport will allow you to bend the profit curve upward and allow for enterprise consolidation and so this is okay, very good. All right. Here I was just looking at 3 core infrastructure areas. I don't want to comment too much on this slide, but if you look at in terms of roads and in terms of energy consumption, the progress in Africa has been flat. That's what the circle says. But if you look at telecom, Africa is as dynamic as the rest of the world. Now, it will take us time, but we absolutely have to catch up in roads and to catch up in power. But while you do it, can you use where you're already competitive enough to leapfrog? Can you use ICT while you're developing infrastructure for road, while developing infrastructure for power to leapfrog, basically? And here is what you could do with that. And it's being demonstrated today, and that's one before my last slide, Mr. Chairman. Okay, there he is. You could use ICT right now to lower the cost of overcoming physical and institutional obstacles while you're still building your roads to get, let's say, extension agents to talk to the farmers to get the best type of cassava for the new Gari industry. You can use ICT to deliver that. Okay, so you can do to build a bridge between millions of dispersed smallholders. You remember what I was saying? Unless the smallholders are integrating those new value chains, they may not reap the benefits of $30 billion in the next 25 years or so. You can use ICT right now as we speak because of the level of development to lower cost of access to technology and services. Those small enterprises I was talking about, where do they acquire their technologies? If you want to improve the quality of your millet-based meal, if you want to improve your quality of gari, if you want to improve your quality of processed tomato, whatever it is, it could be possible through ICT to get it to all those little tiny, so broadly dispersed micro enterprises, to give them the capacity to upgrade processes, to get into more sophisticated products, and then later on perhaps mature to bigger enterprises. You can use ICT to create markets, to create opportunities for smallholders, to link them to financial services, to link them to service providers. And what is valid for smallholders is valid for the millions of micro enterprises that are at the core of industrialization right now. And this is going to be my last slide, why we have not been able yet to use ICT to overcome those disadvantages we have in the other infrastructure sector and as a systemic sector, even the vocational professional training. Why we haven't done it yet is that we have a lot happening in the sector, but content is the issue. And content is the issue because in most of the ICT tools that I have seen so far, they look at an isolated business problem that they're trying to solve for a separate segment of the value chain, not even the entire value chain, of one value chain in a given geography. It's not even a country sometimes, maybe northern Nigeria and this type of crop, but in that crop is maybe just how you manage quality of inputs, right? So if you can get integrated solutions, and that is possible if you challenge our IT community can do that, integrated solutions that digitize all the major interfaces between the smallholders, and in this case, the small enterprises and other value chain actors, technology providers, banks, insurance providers, markets, transport sector, quality assurance, and so on and so forth. And you could have a platform or platforms that do that, that will help use ICT while we're waiting to build the roads, to create the institutions, to get the power to go everywhere, to allow people to use solar cells to tap into the same information and then move the industry ahead. So, summing up, there's going to be amazing potential for agro-allied industrialization, driven by the dynamic processes going on in the regional markets. Demand is exploding, incomes are growing, people are demanding more and better local staples in a varied menu. And that creates a great opportunity. The challenge we have now is industrialization is fragmented. We have a lot of increasing numbers of small micro enterprises that need to acquire technology, that need to acquire capitals and skills for process and product sophistication, that has to go through consolidation specialization. And that is something that has to be orchestrated. It doesn't happen haphazardly. And there's a lot of things that has to go into it. But the opportunities are great. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I've added a slide with all the references for those who would like to see them. There's a lot on this that we did over the last couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Osman. Indeed, promoting value chains needs policy interventions. It cannot happen by itself. That's why we keep reminding ourselves of the lost decades of 1980, 1990s in particular, when governments stood by doing nothing. No analysis, no interventions, and very little happened in the continent. We need to really respond to the demand of rising middle class in Africa. As of now, domestic demand is the main source of growth, the main driver of Africa's growth. And this demand is changing in terms of composition. As Dr. Osman pointed out, demand for processed foods will account for 40% of demand for food. And so for processing is needed. And the question is how to promote regional value chains. We have very small countries. And I always mention this example. When East Africa started to integrate, things started to change very quickly. Opportunities for processing, opportunities for market expansion and regional trade increased very rapidly. Now Kenya is the main trading partner for all countries, almost all countries in East Africa. South Africa is the main trading partner for all countries in Southern Africa. When I was a student of economics, some decades ago, we used to read textbooks coming from the north telling us that African countries cannot trade among themselves because they have similar economic structures. That is wrong. That held us back for a long time. Let me now call our distinguished panelists to contribute to the discussion on agro-allied industrialization in Africa. And let me start with Ms. Hannah Jamal Al-Hilali. Ms. Hannah Al-Hilali is the former acting managing director and director general of international cooperation and planning of the Social Fund for Development in Egypt. She was in the cabinet of ministers for over 13 years. She was mandated as an autonomous. The organization she worked for was mandated as an autonomous organization for job creation and poverty alleviation and economic and social development on all fronts, and is a counterpart with international donors for resource mobilization to finance development aspects. Previously, she had over 25 years of experience in international, regional, and local banks in the areas of marketing, trade, finance, wealth management, operations, internal control, human resources, and corporate communication. Currently, Ms. Al-Hilali is a member of the high-level independent team of advisors of the Sustainable Development Dialogue with the United Nations, ECOSOC. So she sits in the top policy-making body of the United Nations on economic and social conditions. Mr. Hilali, welcome, and let me welcome Mr. Chwala, Chief Executive Officer, Alliance for Community Trade in Eastern and Southern Africa, COMISA Secretariat, Lusaka. Welcome, Mr. Chwala. Mr. Erjan Chwala is the Chief Executive Officer for the Alliance for Commodity Trade in Eastern and Southern Africa. He joined COMISA from the African Fertilizer and Agribusiness Partnership Incorporation in South Africa, where he served as AGRA, I don't know the full name of this, partnership coordinator. Prior to that, he was AGRA's representative in Mozambique. Mr. Chwala is also the current board chairman of the Food Agriculture Natural Resource Policy Analysis Network and member of the UNDP Advisory Board. He worked with many organizations before, including GTZ and others in the region. Mr. Adama Kolobali, welcome please to the podium. He is the chief of Food Security Section of United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. He worked for the Regional Integration and Trade Division of ECA. Is currently working on issues of food security, agriculture, land with a focus on the development and promotion of strategic regional value chains. So let us give our distinguished panelists a round of applause. And let me start with Ms. Hannah, and the question is, what are the structural constraints to agro-allied industrialization? Dr. Osumani told us about the broader challenges, and he mentioned specific examples of millet, and I would like to hear specifically the challenges related to experiences from Egypt in particular.
Thank you very much. And first, allow me to thank ECA and the African Development Bank, who was the main counterpart, for honoring me to be present here today. And let me share with you what the constraints are for the structural constraints actually on the value chains. I would say that cold chains in rural areas are absent. Means of transportation, the infrastructure is not there. The means of transportation, be it railroads, be it railways, the sanitary conditions also in production areas, and most importantly is the underdeveloped markets. In Africa, we really lack, and it's the African continent is still untapped. We really lack the integration, the reciprocity of products, the inter-regional cooperation between our African countries. Maybe I will share with you what we have in Egypt. We do have industrial clusters for agribusiness, and this is a very successful and leading experience that we have. For instance, the infrastructure is there, and from my previous life at the Social Fund for Development to the Cabinet of Ministers, the SMEs part is very important. If we establish clusters for agro-industries in certain areas, in cross-cutting in all governorates geographically spread, and we provide the access to finance for small farmers, also to empower women economically, for youth, and so on and so forth, I think we stand a good chance. And I would like also to reiterate on the South-South cooperation between our countries, our neighboring countries, and the African continent. We had a very interesting experience that I would like to share with you on establishing a social fund in Liberia, which reiterates the importance of South-South cooperation. I think technology transfer, know-how, and access to finance are very important. If we can reciprocate within the African continent, I think we stand a very good chance in avoiding and overcoming the structural constraints that we have in value chain and supply chain. I'm going to talk later on, if you allow me, on a very interesting, successful example of how supply and value chains could work on the ground. And I'm going to focus on women empowerment in this regards and link it to multinationals, to NGOs, and so on and so forth. I'll stop here to allow more time for my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come back to you definitely on the role of women in particular and what government
I'm being very biased to that, and it shows that I'm the only lady on the panel, so I don't know whether this is by coincidence or not.
We will have a challenge question to you.
Okay.
Mr. Chola, you have worked with government and private sector. And obviously, we live in a world where governments have a role to play. But most of the playing will be done by the private sector. The private sector remains the main actor. In your view, and based on the experiences you have had, what measures should government put in place to increase and harness the role of the private sector in promoting agro-allied industrialization in Africa?
Thank you very much, Mr. MC. And also I extend my appreciation to ADB, UNECA, and UNDP for making it possible for us to participate in this discussion. I think one of the basic fundamentals is to understand that the world economy is a mineral-based economy, it's a commodity-based economy. And if Africa does not participate fully and attend well to the issues of driving the continent forward using these two parameters and also making a case on what should work for us, then we'll still be on the lower side of participation. What do I mean by that? I mean that we have seen in the last few months how the commodity prices of the major African commodities, which is minerals and oils, fell down. Agriculture still remained as the fallback position. And in us in COMESA, we look at agriculture, both from the government side and the private sector side, as the only industry that addresses human capital needs of food, healthy, economics, and also social needs. So looking at those 4 parameters, we see it as an essential part of actually working together. As governments, at regional and national levels, I think the fundamental part is that they should see private sector as a partner or as another strong pillar in driving development, in whatever development that they are looking forward to, and not becoming hostile and also viewing the private sector as a competitor. That way, we can actually move our continent forward. Now, from the government's position, the roles of governments have been very easy, but when it comes to implementing, there is always a clash with the private sector. Having worked in both the private and the public, I have noticed and I've learned that the government's main role is actually to provide enabling policy environment, be able to develop, promulgate, and also implement those policies so that the private sector, which is actually a critical arm of government implementation, should be able to expedite what needs to be done in those countries. In many countries, especially from Brazil, we can see how private sector and government have worked together to actually transform the countries. One other leading example is Singapore and Malaysia, where even when governments are making preparations to do a big project, the private sector lines up to actually do the development. It is not in the interest and also in all form of capacity of government to actually expedite every development agenda. We have seen that where governments have locked up themselves to be the lead developer, policy, and implementer, along the way governments get tired because they lack resources to do that. But the private sector, as an implementing partner and also a resource base to do those development. In summary, we say the governments have the power of the pen and the power of regulation, whereas the private sector have the power of the pace and the money to do the work. So this is a complementary effort where governments and private sector should work together. Public sector should make the environment enabling for anyone, including the private sector especially, to be able to play and also to invest on their resources and capacities in the market. So basically that's our experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chola. Yes, governments should empower the private sector and promote an enabling environment. I have some particular issues to raise and to present to the panelists here to address. The issue of lead firms policies, the issue of local content policy, the issue of local sourcing. We have seen for a long time big firms, multinationals in particular, coming to Africa to exploit resources in certain sectors. And then those firms have very little to do with local businesses. Very little linkages forward and backward. And they use the resources, they sometimes produce commodities that are sold outside the country. So even consumers do not benefit a lot from what they produce. So what should governments do in particular to help local firms to insert themselves in regional and global value chains and to be able to benefit from linkages with lead firms, multinationals in particular?
Thank you, Mr. MC. I think one of the challenges that African firms have found themselves is to fit in the global market. I think globalization has not done us well because we were not very prepared for them in terms of, one, information available on what we need to do and what needs to be done. We were also handicapped on issues of incentives that exist in the international markets. For the global markets, they were well prepared, and they were actually prone and privy to the information when globalization actually took place. This is why you see that in the beginning, it was globalization of markets or trade. There was no manufacturing. But later on, they seized the opportunity and also started manufacturing goods outside their countries, which became as globalization of trade. Now, as multinationals, they were well equipped, well funded from their countries. They had technical capacity, and this has not changed. The multinationals still command a lot of respect and presence on the African market. They provide leadership in many sectors that are there. And in Africa, the main ones are construction industry, energy industry, and also manufacturing industries, cosmetics industries, the soaps and so on. We still see the Unilevers still existing in one form or another. We still see the Anglo-Americans existing in mining industries and many others. The BPs, the Caltexes in the oil industry, in the gas industries. Well, what should African governments do? Now, African governments should enact policies, laws, regulations, which actually provide space for the growth of our own industries. In commercial countries, we have what we call the manufacturing policy and also the industrialization policy, where we deal with the issues of local content. Suppose a road is to be constructed from one city to the other. How much should the local people contribute, or how much should the local people provide employment along that channel? In some countries, it actually goes up to 30% of all local contracts for local industries. And then the other 70% can be shared again between international companies and also the local companies. So there is platforms, and there is also deliberate policies where there is an amount of local content that should be there, and there is also policy that deal with the amount of service or contract to be awarded to women and youth. Let me give you an example of road construction. If you are constructing a road of 100 kilometers between two cities, this is very prominent in Kenya and in Zambia, where there's a lot of road construction going on. The local content or the local contribution of the local industry should be at least 30%. Whereas the other 70% should be again shared by the local and international companies. Why is it not at 50 to 50%? This is because the capacity of the local companies is still lower than the capacity of the multinationals. If we move to the Chinese construction companies and Chinese businesses in Africa, we see that in some countries it goes up to 80%, 70%, 90%. In some cases, they even bring labor, general labor force prisoners in China to come and work in Africa. What do the countries do? We just have to have those policies that have a portion, a guaranteed portion of African businesses for two reasons. One, for them to participate in developing our economy. Two, is for us to continue growing our capacity, because capacity has been the challenge. And some governments have faced a challenge that the local companies have failed to actually finalize contracts. Let me give you an example. If there is a tender in the paper, government tender to build certain roads or airports, the Chinese contractors have got funding from their own countries. They can get their funding from Bank of China at 2% to 5%. Whereas a local contractor, for them to borrow at the national ruling rate, it's at least 25% in most countries. Some countries goes up to 70%. So there has to be also incentives on how to finance local capacity building and local industries for them to be able to compete in the global market. The last part, Mr. Chairman, which I can say is also in terms of material costs, sand, bricks, and so on that the local companies can contribute in the local industrialization or local construction companies is one area that we have found that in most of our firms, they don't even have transport facilities to move these materials from point A to point B, let alone they don't even afford to get a bank guarantee for them to access any other form of materials required. So the governments have been working on how to improve the capacity of the local contractors. However, this has been very slow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chola. Indeed, local content policies, capacity building is very critical for inserting local firms into regional and global value chains. On the same subject, let me give the floor to Hannah to tell us about some experiences from Egypt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, my dear colleague Arjan. Did I pronounce it right? Okay. I think I will focus on some incentives that would allow for local sourcing and local agro-industries to be established. First of all, government procurement, and this is something that we have experienced in Egypt through a special law that I'll be very happy to share with you on incentivizing such local sourcing and local agro-industries beneficiaries through government procurement. 10% of government procurement goes to the SMEs beneficiaries as such, and this also applies to farmers and women farmers too. Government land, also government land is provided for free with the appropriate infrastructure in place. So you really need to give them an incentive to allow them to integrate and act as feeding industries to the larger ones. And by the way, this links also to multinationals. So also the public-private partnerships are very important. As you mentioned, my dear colleague, the mobility, their capacity to transform or to transport from one area to the other. So you really need to facilitate, to incentivize them and to encourage them to enter into such activities. Also the marketing aspect. In Egypt, and this is not just limited to agro-industries, but also to all SMEs products, the e-marketing aspect of the business. If you produce this pen and you're unable to sell this pen, then you're in default. So what you do is that you have a website or a portal that would allow beneficiaries to demonstrate their products with all the specs and for the matchmaking purpose of selling their products electronically. So I think feeding industries and industrial clusters with good incentives would certainly allow for the integration within the public-private initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Without any comments, and because I want to give time to the floor for questions and comments, let me go to Adama Kulubali, who works for the Regional Integration and Trade Division of ECA, and ask him to share with us some successful experiences in regional economic communities in supporting agro-allied industrialization. We need to know some of the experiences that really need to be replicated elsewhere or need to be escalated. Adama.
Thank you, Adam, for those specific questions. I just wanted to really thank this for this opportunity that given to for this panel to address an important topics, which is regional value chain in this global context of how to make sure that Africa really reposition itself in the global picture. Yes, we have vast knowledge today of what has already been, I would say, research about this area of agro-industrialization. But I will say that before looking at specifically across the landscape, what are those examples? I wanted to just highlight that. Really, we haven't done enough. When I say we haven't done enough, I'm talking about the whole spectrum of actors, players on the continent. We have to be careful when we are looking at this issue to really put the issue in the right context. Today, when we look at carefully what is really happening globally, we can see that Africa is not producing enough, is not contributing enough. On production, industrial production, most of the performance we have 1%. 1% to 2% is the order of the day. When we look at trade, our share is 2-3% globally. We look at industrial output, 1-2% globally. We look at agricultural performance. So we are not doing enough. This is basically the picture. And we have to look at take a hard look to these numbers. Why is it so that the continent that has that unique position, really unique position to be the center of, I would say, the production today, to be the center of the world factory today, to be able to really take this concept of agro-industrialization, to put it, to apply it in the context of Africa, and to lead the world. This is what it really has to be, we have to look at carefully. In terms of example, I will give you example. Because at ECA, we have been looking at carefully this issue since 1958. At that time, none of the countries were even in the picture. So we have looked at carefully by research this issue. We have vast amount of knowledge. This vast amount of knowledge that ECA has put on the table, starting by the 2009 publication on how to transform agriculture through regional value chain. 2013, how Africa can take the most, get the most of our commodity base. All of this knowledge, and up to the most recent one, how to really, Africa can industrialize. We have put now vast amount of money, knowledge on the table. But the reality is, African government are not taking that vast knowledge to implement. This is reality. Implementation is not there. So, Adam, when you ask me to give examples across the continent, what are those examples? I would say, really, they are not good examples. We haven't done enough yet. We haven't done what needs to be done. The recent publication that we put, industrializing through trade, that was ECA 2014 publication. We have looked at across the continent, all the countries, all the commodities, all the sectors. And what we can see is that Africa, actually, we have been participating in those global value chain. But when we look at carefully the regional value chain for what is happening in Asia, for example, Latin America, we can see that there is huge potential there for Africa really to use regional value chain as a stepping stone to get into global value chain. But this is really where it's hard to do this. It's hard to do it. And I will take few areas. Cotton, for example, cotton. Cotton is happening very well in Egypt. Very well. Egypt is leading the cotton industry on the continent. Yes. But when we look at what is happening, we can see that, yes, it's happening, but even next door, you go to Uganda, you go to Ethiopia, countries are not learning from each other. Why is that so? We have it already in Egypt, but why is not replicated in Uganda? Why countries like in Cote d'Ivoire, this region, West Africa, why cotton? Why we are not using cotton value chain, regional value chain, to also make our own revolution, T-shirt revolution, like it has happened in UK, in America, in Asia, and China. This is where to look at in terms of experience. This can be shared. I mean, in what is happening in Egypt. We look at Mauritius. We have taken a close look to that economy. Mauritius was able to transform. Why? Because Mauritius did use cotton. It moved from sugar. It transformed the sugar sector. It moved to cotton, and then used cotton also to move to another area, which is now a knowledge economy, service economy. This is also a good example to look. But how many countries are sitting closely with the Mauritian government, with the Egypt government, to share this experience, to share this knowledge, to implement that? This is not happening. So I will say that really regional value chain is a broken value chain. We have broken value chain across the landscape. Rice, you take maize, you take livestock, you take all of these commodities. It's broken value chain. So we need to really first build on a national value chain. This is the foundation, the basic. And this is not happening. Even here in Nigeria, Nigeria is the same. We take the cotton sector. Nigeria should, for example, focus on the cotton sector, because this is the entry point. This is what history has tells us. You look at across the landscape in development discourse, you have to use cotton. Everybody dressed clothes, everybody. So we need to start with cotton, like in here. You take India and Nigeria today, why India is making 6%, 7% growth, and why Nigeria is making 1% today? Because India, as the largest sector, agro-allied sector in India, is cotton. It's cotton. It's also the most gendered sector. It's cotton, trillion economy globally, but cotton is making India to rebound to 6%, 7% for its manufacturing sector because of this added advantage of having the cotton sector. And the cotton sector in Nigeria is still, hailing, Nigeria has to lead by example, to show to Africa the way to transform the cotton sector. If that happens, we can replicate that across the continent, because this is what is happening in Bangladesh. So this is just to mention that. The cotton is a case. We can do it. We can do cotton. It's happening in Ethiopia also. This is a good example. But I want to emphasize one thing. The continent is a commodity-based, is a commodity-dependent economy, which means that we have to carefully focus on the commodities. We need to develop our value chain with commodity-based approach. Every country can connect around the commodity-based approach. If I go more specifically, there's no reason why, if you take commodity, cocoa, coffee, there's no reason why we cannot build a cocoa agro-based, cocoa-based industrialization, linking Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon, and Ghana. And why this is not happening? Because of a political economy. Let's face it. We need to talk more about the political economy. We need to talk more about those non-economic issues. This is, I think, where I want to stay. But there are what I want to emphasize: the commodity we have, our regional value chains are broken, seriously broken. We need to fix that. We need to seriously sit and look at carefully the fact so that we can move. Thank you.
Thank you, Adama. I think we have a challenge here to researchers and policymakers. A few years ago, African Union Commission identified 9 strategic agricultural commodities to focus on in terms of production, in terms of promotion of regional value chains, including rice, including cotton. And we thought by now we'll be talking about successful examples of regional value chains encompassing meat, for example, beef in East Africa, cassava in West Africa, rice, cotton, and so on. But Adama said there are no successful experiences to talk about. So the question is, for researchers, is why? Why? So this is a challenge question. But let me give the floor to Hannah to tell us about some experiences from Egypt.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you.
Also to tell us about the gender dimension of Agro-Allied industrialization.
Okay, my favorite topic. So, thank you very much. This was really quite an appetizer for me to speak about Egypt and the cotton industry in Egypt and how to integrate value chains within the untapped African continent. And also I'm going to give an example of sugarcane. For instance, if the sugar value chain in Egypt is well developed in terms of harvesting, processing, extracting, manufacturing, and packing. Why wouldn't a country like Sudan, for instance, and this is just an example, it can be that the sugar cane could be sent to the Egyptian value chains and the processing plant in Egypt to make use of the advanced sugar value chains. So I think I would like to reiterate on, can you hear me well? On integration and complementarity within the regional value chains and linking to the successful established value chain in each and every country within the African continent. Cotton, yes, Egypt is very advanced in this regards. We call it our white gold. And of course, the made in Egypt cotton is branded internationally. So the same thing applies. If we have an existing value chain in Egypt, why not reciprocate, benefit, and also exchange knowledge and technology? I think the technology transfer is of utmost importance. If a country is rich in a certain field, this should be capitalized on to transfer the knowledge to other countries within our region. Egypt is exporting garments, ready-made garments. So there comes your question. From the very start, from the harvesting process until the final product is really exported, and this will definitely increase any country's foreign resources from exports and expand the branding of African products. This is just one example. Regarding your question on my favorite topic, the economic empowerment of women. And women are very active in the agriculture sector in Egypt. Actually, I had the honor and the pleasure of foreseeing a very live example of partnership, and partnership is an important pillar in the SDGs. And of course, we see poverty, hunger, and so on and so forth, which is the topic of our conference today as an important pillar too. So we went to a rural area. We partnered with the African Development Bank, with CARE International, which is an international organization, with Danone as a famous multinational, of course, in dairy products. And dairy products also is a very important aspect when it comes to how we can capitalize on the cattle feeding and the cattle breeding and the dairy products within the agriculture sector. So 700 women, and I underline the word women, were trained by the international NGO to produce milk and dairy products, and then supply this dairy product to the multinational, Danone. So you have the complete cycle there, a donor funding the process, an international organization providing for the capacity building, an NGO handling the transaction, and a multinational which buys the final product from, which buys the dairy product from the producers, the 700 women who have been trained. And this is also replicated in other sectors, agriculture sectors, in different areas, whereby women are trained, they raise the standard of living of their families, and they're able to sell their final product to a multinational. So this explains the beauty of the integration, the complementarity, the capacity building, and the SMEs for women entrepreneurs. We have women entrepreneurs who export their products. We have women entrepreneurs who carry the corporate social responsibility angle within their business, meaning that, for instance, one of the entrepreneurs started her business from the comfort of her own home with a $100 project. Now she has a small factory, she's exporting her product, and she also provides corporate social responsibility for the women workers in her factory, providing for sort of grants when they get married, and all the expenses related. So this demonstrates how important women entrepreneurship is. If you empower women economically, you empower women socially, and then they can have political participation as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Obviously, this is a good example of how targeted measures can work in supporting women farmers and supporting women entrepreneurs in promoting agro-allied industrialization. This session started 15 minutes late, so it has eaten into the time for floor questions, but still I will give you Now I would like to open the floor for questions, and but I will give fewer minutes for panelists to respond. Okay, let me start there, please. Yes, yeah, the two of you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I am Lamanga Ngongi. I'm here as chair of the African Fertilizer and Agribusiness Partnership Board. So it's nice to hear a lot of research that has been done in the economic factors and for trade and things. Wonderful. But I think there's an element that is missing, more of the anthropological, sociological, and psychological research that needs to be done to explain why Africans are not able to take advantage of the conditions that exist that should be able to move us forward. I do not want to downplay the research in economics and technology, but there are a lot of technologies that exist. The examples of India and Korea and Egypt and China and the rest exist. We all read about them. The question is, why are we not able to take advantage of those conditions that we have seen that have worked? There must be some other factors which are more psychological, sociological, and anthropological, not just economics and not just money. There must be. The Chinese, Indians, and the rest come to Africa to make money, to do what? To develop their countries. Africans, we take our money and send it where? Outside of Africa. To store outside of Africa. To make money where? Outside of Africa. So there must be some factors that we need to address. It's not just technical, and it's just not economic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Mustafa Said, a final year student of Economics and Development Studies in Federal University, Kashiri, Gombe State. Well, as opposed to what my colleague just said, that he wants to deviate his question from the economic perspective to a more social perspective. Mine is still on the economic perspective because I'm a student. My question goes to Dr. Usman, who just presented on something about value chain and how to empower small scale farmers. Now, I have this question and it goes like this. Because looking at the curve that you just presented, sir, where the profitability tend to have been decreasing as the number of farms increased because there was lack of the use of technology. Now, you said whenever technology is introduced, now profitability also shoots up. Now, my question is, sir, don't you think even with technology, because the farm sizes are very small, don't you think that because these farms are very small, they will tend to not be able to utilize their overheads, meaning that the cost will be too much for them, which means they won't be very profitable since they are very small in size? I'm talking of the scale economies that will result due to the introduction of technology in small scale farming, because they might not be able to yield as much revenue as that can be earned in large scale farming. That's my question, sir. Thank you. I remain Mustafa Said.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the panelists, and everything was great. My name is Emim Ndiokubayo. I work for the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa as a policy and advocacy officer. I wish to recognize the complementarities between what you've just said, despite the many challenges we are having. So, but my question is really for us to consider those complementarities and all of us ensure they are working where we are. Dr. Namanga is just asking a question: why is it not moving? Yet we have a lot of researches on the shelves or somewhere. Can we take a step further, help our policy makers to implement all those recommendations we have given to them? That is one. And that, for me, it's not a work of policymaker alone. It's all of us, actually, to ensure that what we are finding is working. Why should other continents work and not us. There should be deliberate efforts in terms of policy making, in terms of recommendations, but everybody in the society to ensure Agric is given due attention. That's for everybody. Second, I really like the experience from Egypt on gender aspects. If you look at what is happening on the continent and the majority of women being on, you know, farming and so on, and yet what they get in agro-allied industry is very little. So many analyses they are showing, even when they are employed, they are paid merely salaries. They are not moving at all. So something is wrong somewhere. And we are, all of us, responsible. We should learn from that, ensure we are empowering positively women and youth to embrace, you know, all the aspects of value chain development and input to that. Voila, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, the lady behind you. Yeah. Please, okay.
Merci beaucoup. Je suis Ginette Mondongo Kamara, économiste principale du PNUD au Bénin et au Togo. Je voulais comprendre quelle est la place dans les analyses du degré de compétitivité de l'agro-industrie en Afrique. Je parle de ça parce que je sais qu'il y a dans d'autres pays, il y a la question de la protection des industries naissantes d'une part. Il y a également le fait que certains produits alimentaires ou agricoles sont très subventionnés dans d'autres pays. D'autres pays ont des coûts salariaux très très bas. Également, les autres pays ont des niveaux d'éducation de base et de compétences. Ça joue au niveau des coûts de production et de la compétitivité. Et je pense que j'aimerais bien que les panélistes m'expliquent un peu la place du degré de compétitivité de l'agro-industrie en Afrique dans cette difficulté que l'Afrique a à aller vers cette agro-industrialisation. Merci.
Thank you. We have two panelists who are francophone, and I'm sure they understood your question. They will respond to it. So, okay, yes. Yeah.
Thank you all for a very interesting presentation. My question is directed to Usman. Usman, the same forces that are leading to the agro-industrialization, population trend, urbanization, change in diets, will also increase the competition for water. And it seems to me that the fourth element in your presentation of power, communication, and transport should be water, because that will be a critical bottleneck going forward for industrialization in Africa.
Okay, yes, there. Yeah, the two gentlemen there. Yeah, that will be the last.
Thank you very much. My name is Ali Madugu, Managing Director of Dala Foods Nigeria Limited, an agro-allied processing company in northern Nigeria. And I want to comment, first of all, to the presentation of Mr. Usman. I really agree with you that the issue of processing as an item of the chain is very, very important and is the way forward and the only way out. But the way we are looking at it mostly is process just for the sake of processing. The way I think we should be looking at it is we look at the palm production and, like you have presented here, the final food. We now start from the final food going back to the palm, to the fields production. For example, the example you give from Senegal, maybe chakiri. If we look at chakiri, okay, chakiri is one thing of a product, but how can we make chakiri, how can we simplify chakiri becoming a food on the table? So those value chain on the processing in the middle are the most important aspect that we look at that will take us to where we are going, because we cannot change the food of Africans. Food of Africa is food of Africa. Secondly, to Mr. Chula, the issue of globalization, it was said yesterday, it was said today, that we in Africa, we are the victims because it affects us negatively. Now, if we are looking at how to feed ourselves and how to take our position in terms of food production and agricultural production, this is one very important aspect which we will all have to put our hands together and do. This is on one side. If you look at the other side, because I'm talking on the issue of policy, we look at the issue of EPA, Economic Partnership Agreement of EU and Africa, Pacific and the Caribbean. Today, from what we were told, Southern Africa, Eastern Africa, they have already signed EPA. West Africa, almost all the countries signed, exception of Nigeria and Mauritania. Globalization, the negative effect, and the issue of signing EPA, which just asks us to open our markets unlimited, to give unlimited access to the European product into our market. If we do that, can't we see that we are still going back to the mistakes that were made during signing of globalization and other and the serious effect it had on us? So my comment to Mr. Chula is, how do we think, or how can we make our government in terms of policy to really understand what we are going into and where we have come from on the issue of globalization and the issue of EPA? Thank you.
Okay, understood. Yeah. Yes, one here, there, and then the last. Yes. Okay.
My name is Ondo Nadiwa. I'm the managing partner of Strategic Resources Limited, an agro-business consulting outfit based here in Nigeria. My question links directly to the one asked by my colleague here, which ties in on the issue of public policy. Now, I must begin by commending the presentation by Mr. Usman. I mean, it highlighted quite very, very salient issues. The comment that came from Adam Coulibaly, it's so pertinent, and I think that is where we should hinge the reality of whatever we're talking about here. Now, the economic issues, fantastic as they are, the real issues here are political economy, and there are also issues of the disconnect between the policy makers and the needs of Africa. Now, when you are talking about the engagement between the public sector and the private sector, there's a very, very serious discontinuity as far as Africa is concerned. And and this is a matter that if we are to get it right, we have to hammer on that. The public policy makers feel completely detached from the problems and the realities that are affecting us because they have access to monies, what we call corruption in unveiled language. The lack of transparency, access to monies freely that you feel that you can relax and the people will suffer. Now, you talk about the private sector. I want to tell you that the private sector is completely left also in the dark, in the cold, because the public policy makers are so are so comfortable. Now, having said this, how do we link? How do we now address the real issues which border on the issues of governance? The issues of governance, and I want to now appeal that this is where we should really hinge whatever we're talking about here if we will get the real results. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the main presenter and the panelists for a wonderful discussion. There is no question about the critical role of agro-allied industries in taking the African economies forward, especially addressing some of the challenges identified by the other panelists. But my question is for Professor Badian, especially regarding the slide number 1, some of the assumptions you made. You mentioned the demand is going to explode, But if you look at the graphs, I felt the assumptions made there are too strong until the actual numbers as of today, and then it explodes depending on the true strong assumptions. But you know, during the last couple of years and perhaps the next 2-3 years, the African economies will be under threat, as mentioned, because of the commodity driven economies. We know the commodity prices are going down, and that might have a serious problem on the agriculture as well. As mentioned, agriculture is a fallback sector, but if, say for example, the economy is not doing well, we will get stuck in a subsistence agricultural sector. So basically what we need to look at is how we should address the political economy issues, some of the structural issues that you have mentioned, and the other allied or related issues that Africa is facing. Thank you.
My name is Olagunjo Kehinde. I'm a PhD student at the University Carlo Cattaneo from Italy. And my question and a few observations goes thus. Based on the responses from the panelists, we were left with a question. You gave us an instance that the sugar value chain in Egypt is quite doing good. And you were like, why is Sudan yet to adopt the same thing, the same policy, the same action plan taken by Egypt? That gives us an insight that there is yet a framework that is characterized from the basis of economic integration. Today, we learned that the productivity of cocoa in Ivory Coast is quite good, is quite doing good. But yet, the level of productivity in Nigeria of cocoa is nothing to write home about. So my point is this. What is the current framework that binds economic integration in Africa? What is the level? What is the current assessment of economic integration in Africa? That is one. And secondly, I haven't looked at the level of economic integration in Africa. What are the factors? What are the contributing factors that over time affected this economic integration? Of course, we have AU, that's African Union, and we have some other unions, economic unions. What are their roles in making sure that there are economic integrations? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for very interesting comments and questions. And now, just to eat into your tea time, I will give the panelists 2 minutes each to respond to these very interesting questions, with no further comments from me. Let me start with Mr. Usman.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to go back and ask us to perhaps look closely at where African economies are right now. Because I think the last 10, 15 years were remarkable in terms of the history of economic development and growth in Africa. If we don't recognize that, then we will miss a lot of good opportunities to learn. What worked over the last 10, 15 years, where African economies are growing by 5 and 6% per year. What worked right in the last 10, 15 years, when 7 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world were Africans. That's the questions we have to ask. And then in every country in Africa, there have been success stories. What happened? What drove those success stories? What were the determining factors? That's how development goes. There's no question that the 60s and 70s and 80s were very difficult decades, actually, where most economies shrunk. But even now, when we're talking about bad years to come and decades to come, Africa is still projected to grow by 4% in the next 2 years. So let's look at what's working in each and every of these countries, and they do exist. That's very, very important. I wanted also to say that 50 years in the life of a country is not much, especially if you spend those first 3 decades having a lot of difficulties. I think African economies and countries are on the right path right now, but we have to accelerate and sustain the right direction that we are on. The private sector, enterprises, there's a saying in the US, you don't make an entrepreneur, you support an entrepreneur. Somebody has the innovation, the drive to be an entrepreneur. What the state could do and still has to focus on is to create the conditions for that. And it's not abstract rulemaking. I do agree with the policy for local content, but if you don't have the infrastructure, if you don't have the training, the skills upgrading, if you don't have the financial systems, if you don't have the conditions for the private sector to thrive, you'll be punishing your own populations because you'll be forcing them to have lower quality services and goods. So there are ways that government can create an environment for the private sector to grow by cutting red tape, by making sure the civil service don't take advantage of them, by investing in technology generation, by investing in infrastructure. We talk about cotton sector here, and I'll stop with that. If you go to a modern gin, you don't see a human being. It's all mechanical. It's all automatized. If you're having power outages, how is it going to work? If you cannot provide for sustainable power to run a system like how is it going to work, right? So I think there's nothing extraordinary about Africa, neither positive nor negative. It's really empirical, hardcore way of doing business. And African private sector operators are learning it. African governments will have to learn that. But opportunities are vast. If people look at what happens in each and every country, in each and every value chain over the last 10, 15 years, we will know what worked. All we need to do is to replicate that and to scale it up. Now, I make it sound very simple, but I just wanted to say that these are not the times to be pessimistic. These are times to be very attentive to the change that took place and see how we can safeguard and sustain them.
Thank you, Dr. Osman. Indeed, the fundamentals for Africa's growth remain positive, and we should be optimistic. Ms. Han Hilali, 2 minutes, please.
Sure, I'll do it in telegraphic points very quickly. First of all, we still lag behind. Let's admit that. We have to realize our problems, and we have to really give it a good jump start on integration and complementarity within our African continent. I think the African Union should play a very important role to push policymakers to start implementing integration and complementarity, because it all lies at the end within the hands of the governments. Second is the women and youth employment and job creations, empowerment, as SMEs play a very important role as an engine for growth, for economic growth. Reciprocity of products within our African continent. This is very important to enhance trade and reciprocity within our countries. Technology transfer. And we have seen examples of the supply chain and the value chain. And if we succeed to transfer such technologies to African countries within the region, I think we stand a very good chance to further enhance economic empowerment. South-South cooperation, and I reiterate on this, on the importance of South-South cooperation. Each and every country should capitalize on its strength and try to integrate and collaborate with other countries in the region to promote South-South cooperation and transfer best practices to other countries. So I think if we succeed to do that, we stand a very good chance for to enhance the growth of our African countries at large. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hilali.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the picture is not so bleak. There is a lot of hope for Africa. 50 years ago, Africans didn't own banks. 50 years ago, Africans did not own businesses that can do business in the global, in the globe. Africans were fully on the receiving end. The last 35 years have seen Africa's forgotten on agriculture development. It is just in the last 10 years that you saw the impetus changing back into agriculture as an industry that could build and develop our economies. What am I saying? I'm saying that Africa has changed. For the past 5 years, we have seen Africa maintaining a steady growth economically, which was not there 30, 40 years ago. What am I saying now? I'm saying that we are changing, but the pace of our change is very slow. I can also attest to you today that Africa is integrating faster than the EU did. There is enough record and statistics to show that. While we are integrating at this pace, we are actually even integrating faster than others who did it before. It took EU many years to agree on many small things, 20, 30 years to agree on seed and fertilizer issues. But for Africa, it has taken us only 3 to 5 years. And we are moving on. Policy. And what should we do? Dr. Namanga, who is also my parent in my profession, he says, what should we do? There is so much knowledge on the shelves, in our brains, also in our own peripherals. What should you do? In my opinion, we should do 3 things. The first thing that we should do is that we need to do our own self-discovery. We have so much potential, and a few Africans have made it. Those are our, those are our people that we can copy and learn from. There are so many Africans that have shown leadership and prosperity and so on. One of them is, we know very well, Ibrahim, who has developed the index for testing and checking African governance system. There are many others like that. They are clear role models. The second thing that we should do is that we should also change our mindset from dependency to independence and to become dependable people. The third thing that I think which is the most important is that we need to act more than we have done before. We need to do things in a greater way with a greater picture and understanding. Public policy is necessary, but if we are the drivers, we are the people that put people in government. We are people that actually put them there and remove them there. We need to have a very clear role that we play in order to bring clear objectivity and success in our development. Of course, development is a political process. If the political process is right, many things fall in place. And I can assure you that if we have the good political process and good political leadership, some of these things that we are talking about can actually be addressed by meaningful leadership. And that is, I think, the cause that Africa is taking on slowly. However, there has been incidences where Africa has moved 5 steps forward, 8 steps backward. Now, what are we saying? We should not rehearse our mistakes, but realize that these are mistakes and move on with the right norms of things. I close to say, Africa is on the right path. We are walking onto a free trade area, which was not even there 50 years ago. 50 years ago, nobody knew that Africa could have even an African passport. You could not have an ECOWAS passport, a COMESA passport. Now you have a COMESA passport where when I'm moving out of Lusaka, I can come into Nigeria, West Africa, everywhere, using a regional integration passport. While we are also striving this, there is a lot to do on customs union, meaning we have to also allow the movement of goods and services within our region. We cannot trade 15% within ourselves and trade 87% with the rest of the world. What about if those people say we don't want to trade with you? It means we are in danger. We need to grow our own inter-Africa trade in a big way. For us, I think in COMESA, we have a vision of a common market where we are going to share many things, our resources, our difficulties, our challenges, and our successes. And we look for a political leadership that actually is able to move our continent in this direction. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chola. Yeah. Indeed, there is a lot of work to be done by Africans to realize the positive things you talked about. Yeah. Adama, please, 2 minutes.
Thank you. I think for us at ECA, we really would like to thank the president of the bank, of the ADB, for giving us, to all of us, a chance to really take a fresh look to the issue of how to go really about agricultural transformation on the continent. This is a unique opportunity because we have a leadership here for the first time to critically look at why on the continent we have failed to really go about making the green revolution that has already happened elsewhere in the world. If we look at across the landscape, in some other region, they are at their fourth industrial revolution. We are not even yet at our first one, which brings me to say that we really have to think. We have to clearly think out of the box. We have to go down at the basics. ECA has comprehensively looked at all the economies. The basics are not there to grow. The basics are not there to strongly engage on structural transformation. Growth is just a necessary condition. It's not sufficient. The sufficient condition is to add structural transformation. So I want to emphasize here is that this is a unique opportunity to really use regional value chain. And ECA, we are focused on this issue. Even in 2 weeks from now, we are preparing to call across the continent all the institutions to join us in Abidjan in 2 weeks to look at critically to impact this box. How can we use regional value chain to really go at scale, to look at our commodities, to drill down to the issues, to add values for the agricultural one, to look at beneficiations for the mineral one. So this is very, very important. If we don't go at scale, we are not going to seize the opportunity that ADB is giving this time to really turn around our economies. Yes. I want to also emphasize that when we are talking about inclusive growth, particularly for agriculture, we are talking about women, because women are the face of agriculture in Africa. If we move ahead, 10, 20 years ahead, it will be the face of agriculture will be the youth. And the opportunity is also to critically look at this issue of agro-industrialization. What is the opportunity for the youth here to create a job for them? When we are talking also about inclusivity, is to creating value first. We need to create value before we can even share it. If we don't create value in Africa, we don't focus on analysis of the value, we are not going to move.
We have to cut it here.
Yes. So I just want to say that. And again,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I have to cut it
yes.
here.
Thank
and
you.
Let us give a round of applause to the panelists for an excellent panel, excellent questions. There was only one question which we did not have time to look at, but we will have the opportunity to discuss greening Africa's industrialization at 2:30 today in a special session, greening Africa's industrialization. Thank you. We will have 15 minutes break and then go to concurrent sessions. Thank you. My name is Adam Al-Hareka. My name is Adam Al-Hareka. I'm Director of Macroeconomic Policy Division of United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. And it is my pleasure to moderate this session on fostering agro-allied industrialization through regional value chain. We heard a lot about value chains as one of